What's up, Variant Nation, and welcome to another episode of Variant the Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Arris Quinones.
And I'm Tim Connolly.
And today we have quite a bit of comic book news. I feel like recently we've been talking a lot about comic books, but because of DC fandom and stuff and all the DC movies and stuff coming out, we've been talking about a lot of comic book movies. But today we're going to talk about some comic books, which is really exciting because that's the source of all of this, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of big stories have dropped just recently, and also, as far as Thor goes, there's been that's just been a great series for the totality of the last year, I would say.
For sure. I said on my Instagram pretty recently, that's my favorite book currently coming out every month right now. It's real. You know what it is with that series? It's just so much fun. Like I don't remember the last time I read a book like consistently that made me like my mouth drop or go like, oh my God, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With each and every page. I'm like, wow, this just keeps getting better and better somehow. And we're only 6 issues in, you know what I mean? So in the grand scheme of things, that's not even that many issues. And it's been fantastic thus far. But that's one of the books we're going to talk about. Thor.
That's right.
We're going to talk about Maestro Hulk issue 1, and then of course Three Jokers.
Yes, and all three big books, and all three anticipated as well.
For sure, especially Three Jokers. That book, much like Doomsday Clock, we've been waiting for it for, I believe, a little over 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years.
A decade. That's how long we were waiting. A decade.
I'm just hoping, because issue 2 is supposed to come out September 29th. I'm just hoping it's not like Doomsday Clock where, we get an issue every 2 or 3 months.
Right.
Or there's just delay after delay. Thankfully, this one is not 12 issues long. This one is only 3 issues.
Yeah.
So after issue 2, we'll be more than halfway through. And what's really cool is every issue is going to be double size, essentially, like the prestige format. Like the first issue was 48 pages of actual comic book content.
Yeah.
So 48 pages of actual story, which is insane because a normal comic book is 20 pages. So that is more than double sized, actually, which is
I will say
nuts.
Not a lot of dialogue though.
No, but I mean, he, with all the paneling and stuff, they tell you get the point through the visually, which I always think is a little more impressive, where you can just get the mood and feel just right just by looking at the pictures.
Yeah, without question, and it definitely worked. For sure.
And do you want to start with Three Jokers? You kind of just want. I feel like we should just. It's definitely probably we're going to be the most long-winded on that because this is the most awaited one, and it's a pretty long issue.
Yeah, we can start there, and then we'll go Three Jokers, Thor, and then we'll wrap up with Maestro Hulk. But before we do that, I think it's very important that we acknowledge the tragic and shocking passing of Chadwick Boseman this past weekend.
Yeah,
that caught everyone absolutely off guard. Chadwick Boseman, everyone knows who I'm talking about. He played Black Panther, T'Challa. Very few people apparently actually knew he was even sick. I recently saw him in a video where he was really, really thin. And like, I guess everyone, I just assumed it was for a role. I mean, this is a really young guy. From everything that we could tell, he was a very young and healthy guy. But he passed away. He actually was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer several years ago. And sadly, it won out. And Chadwick Boseman passed away at the age of 43 this past weekend. And our deepest condolences to his entire family and everyone who knew and loved him. As many of us as fans absolutely loved him, especially as Black Panther. He meant a lot to a lot of people in that role. And he will be greatly missed.
For sure. I mean, everything obviously you just said, it was so heartbreaking, you know what I mean? Because I think obviously no matter how it came about, if we knew or didn't know, but I think even more so the fact that it was so out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like no one, he kept it a secret for 4 years, man. He was literally filming like Endgame, Infinity War, and all these other movies that he did outside of the MCU.
21 Bridges.
While literally dying of cancer. You know what I mean? But it also speaks to how like good of a person he actually was, because he was constantly going to these children's hospitals of kids battling cancer, and showing them hope. And, he's a superhero. He's one of the biggest characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
Everyone knew who he was. He's the Black Panther, one of the most successful movies Marvel has. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he was using that to, bring light and positivity and, to kids and people everywhere. It is really, really, really unfortunate, man. Like it's one of those things where you kind of get for a loss for words, because it's like, dang, man, like it just sucks. Like, what else can you say? It's like, it's just so unfortunate because obviously we all knew him as, T'Challa, the Black Panther. And that's, as far as his legacy goes, that's what everyone's going to remember. He's King of Wakanda, Black Panther. But outside of that, we've watched, and I'm sure many people watch, so many interviews with him. And just as an actual real life human being, he seems so down to earth and helpful.
Yeah.
And again, going out, helping all these kids, and it's just really sad, man. So again, condolences to all of his loved ones. We wish you the best.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And again, he was so young. But I think that one of the things that he's going to be most remembered for, and that says a lot to his character as a man, is not his incredible roles that he played. Because again, we all know him as T'Challa, but he also played Thurgood Marshall in the movie Marshall. He played Jackie Robinson in 42. He
was great, and that's the first movie I ever saw him in.
Yeah, he played James Brown in Get On Up. I mean, he played these huge, monstrous figures throughout our history, these icons, and he did it over and over again. But what he's going to be remembered for, again, just speaking to his character as a person, is what he did off camera. He, like you mentioned, he spent so much time pouring himself into charities and to giving back. And, whether you, no matter how you feel about things politically, of things that he was for or against or any of those things, I mean, there's just you can't deny the character of a man who looks to give of his time and his energy wherever and however he can. And I just saw, I saw a video of him, when he was shooting Black Panther, and they were waiting for Black Panther, and he was talking about, he already knew at the time that he had cancer. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about these kids that, he got a letter from their parents saying that they were just trying to hold on until they could see the Black Panther movie.
Yeah, I saw that video.
Just, it's heartbreaking, and to see how much that meant to him, and, see him break down because he was dealing with it himself, but wasn't revealing that to the public. To see someone who is going through so much personally, but still cares and is using the time they have and the platform that they have to impact others positively. I mean, that just screams, strength of character and people that we need more of on this planet. So, rest in peace, Mr. Boseman. And again, our love and deepest condolences to the Boseman family.
For sure.
And we're sorry to start off on such a sad note, but this we had to at least acknowledge and talk about him, because he's someone who is worth talking about.
Oh, for sure. And for many reasons, for everything you just said. And then, even just from, the superficial nerdy realm, he's going to be known as, he's Black Panther, right? But for all of the above. But I do, I've been noticing a lot of people, I guess they've been using the phrase, I don't know if they've originated this for him or it's been used before, but it's the first time I've ever seen it, but the whole rest in power, I feel like that is very fitting. They've been using that for him if you search, Twitter and everything. So, rest in power, Mr. Boseman. You will definitely be missed, and your life was far too short. Very, very sad.
No doubt.
But to bring it up, like you said, it's sorry to start it off at a downer. To bring it back up, let's talk some good comic books. Three Jokers, as we're going to start to get into right before, obviously, having to at least acknowledge the farewell of a great man.
Yeah. It's hard to pass from something like that. I mean, 2020, and I texted out, you may have seen it. I texted out this past weekend, man. 2020 has just been so hard. It really has been. It's been really hard for a lot of people. There's been a lot of pain, a lot of struggling going on, and it just has really felt like one thing after the other. So, we take our time, and what we do here is we seek to entertain and to focus on the distractions, the things that make getting through all of this madness a little easier. But from time to time, it's important to stop and to recognize, like, you know, hey, there's a lot going on in our world. And, you know, we're not here to pretend like it's not. We're just here to go with you down this road and bring a little light and a little levity wherever we can. So with all that said, you know, let's dive into some things that are a little bit more on the lighthearted side, in some Three Jokers, which is, again, one of the most anticipated books in recent memory, and that we waited, like I said, like a decade for.
A decade for, yes. Happy things, happy things, happy things. Even though it's sadistic because it's the Joker.
Yeah.
But well, starting off, to prove how the popularity of this book had over, I believe, 300,000 pre-orders, which is insane. Like, now, for people who don't know, that is insane for today's comic book market. This isn't the 90s where books were selling, you know, in the hundreds of thousands all the time, and then even hitting like the millions. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it, like, to put that in perspective, like, the number one selling book is, you know, more so than not, Batman, and that hits around 90,000 copies a month to 100,000, maybe a little over 100,000. So for this to get 300,000 pre-orders,
crazy.
That's pretty nuts. That just shows, you know, the hype around this, because starting all the way in the beginning, this all started at the end of Darkseid War. Like, this was teased at the end of the New 52, man. Like, that's when this seed was planted. All the way back then at the end of the Darkseid War, when Batman was on the Mobius chair. And, you know, having the Mobius chair, he has access to all the information in the universe. He's like, yo, Joker, what about him? And he was shocked of the answer he got. And the answer he got was, there's 3 of them. So ever since then, we've got little teases here and there, but it was all leading to this. And that was, I don't even know, I guess that was like 3 years ago, 3.5 years.
Like eternity.
Yeah, a long time. And, you know, needless to say, with all that buildup, everyone was very excited to see what the heck's going on, because just the fact that saying that there's always been 3 Jokers, like, that's like, wait, what? For any comic book fan, any Batman Joker fan, you're like, wait, you're trying to tell me for as long as Batman's been around, there's always been 3 Jokers?
Right.
Like, how are you going to explain that? So that's, you know, the big hype for this. On top of it being Batman and Joker, you know, everyone's like, how are you going to explain one of probably the biggest or the most popular villain in comic books? Everyone knows who he is. How are you going to explain that there's always been 3 of him running around? And that's what this series is gonna do.
Which is really, I mean, always from the very beginning, that's been the big question. I think that's why this has been such a highly anticipated book, and why everybody was just, you know, as soon as this comes out, I want to see where this is going, because, you know, the Joker's been around forever, and to create, you know, or even to present the idea that you're about to create some brand new element to his mythos that explains how he has accomplished all the things that he's accomplished against Batman over the years, is such a fascinating and compelling idea. So, yeah, like everyone else, we were like, when's this coming, for the love of God?
Yeah, there's a handful of books that come out, like, when the issue drops, I have to read it that day. So I can't do that with everything, you know, just life and, you know, work and everything. But this was one of the ones where it's like, as soon as this book comes out, I don't want anything being spoiled for me. I have to read it right away.
Right.
Obviously, we both read it. So now's the point where we're going to get into spoiler territory. So if you haven't read Three Jokers, issue 1, spoilers galore from here on out, because we're going to talk about everything that went on.
Flee!
In the first issue.
Run for your life!
Yeah, run. Spoilers start now. So the first thing I want to talk about, which I thought was really interesting, is obviously the issue starts off with he's hurt, right? He's coming back to the Batcave with Alfred's stitching him up, and there's like a montage of how he got his wounds over the years, and like from what villains and how. But and this kind of happened. This leads into like Barbara Gordon working out at a gym, and we see, you know, the Joker's doing crimes. While all this is happening, the Joker's doing crimes all around Gotham. 3 different crimes, apparently at the same time. But what I thought was very interesting is at the end of all these pages, from the first, I don't know, 10 or whatever pages, you know, they tell you the name of each Joker. Like, the first one's like the comedian. Yeah. Then we see the clown, and then we see the criminal. So right out the gate, I
think it's actually the opposite. I think criminal is first, comedian is second, and then clown is last.
Oh, I wasn't necessarily saying them in order. I'm just saying like what they were. Okay. Right. Yeah. So you have the clown, the comedian, and the criminal, right? So I think it's just interesting that out the gate, they're already giving us the persona in type, or each type of the 3 Jokers.
Right.
kind of breaking them down to era to era. And I was like, interesting. So are you saying like the Golden Age one is like the comedian, or you know what I mean? Is the
Yeah.
current one the clown? I thought that was very, very interesting because I think Geoff Johns, if you've been reading Geoff Johns stuff for a while, everything's on purpose. Nothing is just there just to be there. Like, he's one of those writers where by the time you get to the last issue of his arc, you got to go back and be like, oh, that was meant to that. Or you just remember, you're like, so that's why this happened 5 issues ago. Or he said this one line, because much like Doomsday Clock, for me personally, the majority of that series was a very slow burn. It was just kind of like, But once that final issue came, it tied everything together and made everything prior awesome.
Right.
So out the gate, we kind of have, like, again, the personas of each of these 3 Jokers. And the issue, basically, you see Batgirl and Batman with the GCPD at a crime at Ace Chemicals, where they're all like, how is this possible? How is a Joker doing all these crimes at the same time? Like Harvey Bullock's like, well, obviously he's got imposters. And, Jim Gordon's asking Batman, how is this possible? And can you identify the bodies here? And Batman's all like, no, we can't, because, basically their jaws has been broken so much that you can't even use their dental records, and the acid that poisoned them has burned off their fingerprints and all that stuff and messed up their DNA. So, like, for the same reason that the Joker, you can't identify who he ever was, same thing with his victims, because he essentially does the same thing, which I thought's pretty, like, right out the gate, like, how crazy is that, right? Like, a setup that, what is happening? It's just like all these deaths and carnage within the first like 10, 15 pages of this book. You're like a quarter way through the story and you're like, oh, all right, where Batman's like kind of stumped. You know what I mean? I love how Johns was playing with the whole identity thing, where he's like, I don't know, man. It's for the same reason we don't know who the Joker is. I don't know who these people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of also liked where they showed in the various panels where Batman starts trying to figure out, he's like deducing what is going on at the original crime scene that he arrives at. And he's talking and Bullock is like, oh man, Bats is finally cracked up. He's lost it. And then Batgirl finally goes, he's talking to me. And she's like standing, she's like hovering above them on a ledge. But yeah, it had a very cool opening. And I don't know about you, but I thought that initial opening where we see Batman, he comes in wounded. And the Batmobile in this book also, by the way, looks dope. Just want to say that.
It's very reminiscent of the 89 Batmobile.
Yeah, the Keaton Batmobile. So anyway, that was a little side note there. But yeah, so we had this moment where you see Batman and he comes in wounded. He's been stabbed by the Penguin. And then it goes through this montage of you see all these injuries, and they show you how he got the injuries from the various villains in his rogues gallery. And I really loved that montage. I just thought it was such a smart, interesting run of them showing us what Batman has gone through for Gotham and what he's been through over the years. And that, for me, I was like, this isn't for nothing. They're showing us this for a reason.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because we all know what Batman's been. We all know Batman's story. We all know what he's been through with the various villains in his rogues gallery. But this was very deliberate. It showed very specific scars, how he got them. It shows this very beat up. And then there's this moment where it shows Batman where he's almost like he's hearing the Joker's laughter in his head. And he just is working his way out of this mental state that he's in. And there's this moment where he opens his eyes and you just close in on his eye. And it's like he's becoming angrier by the second, the more he thinks about it. And that whole sequence there, I just felt like it was so deliberate. And I really am going to be interested to see what's going on with Batman as this continues to roll out as well.
Yeah, speaking to that scene specifically, I love how everything you just said, like up until like I'm hearing that laughter, led all the way back to the start of it when his parents were killed in Crime Alley. Where it's like he was thinking, it just went all the way full circle, almost like, yeah, all those scars I have and took, this is why. You know what I mean? Because of this moment, which again is very, very, and you're not going to go back all the way to the root of Batman's origin unless, you're really trying to drive home something emotional by the end of the story. I thought very, very clever for Johns to give a retelling of his origin, and it was so simple too. It was like a page, but it's like, it's almost like the beginning of BVS, where it's like that's all you need to see. You just need to see, walking out of a movie theater, and then the family getting mugged and murdered in cold blood, and then that's Batman, right?
Yeah, and then they immediately go from there. And I think that's just part of the reason that it was interesting, is they immediately go from there to them talking about how the Joker killed a member of the Moxon family, which was tied originally to his parents' death until Joe Chill claimed responsibility for the murders.
Dun.
Yeah. So, and it leaps from this montage where you're seeing, like Arris said, where it goes from the very beginnings of with his parents' death to what led to him becoming Batman, all the way through all these instances of him battling crime in Gotham. And it's just really super compelling the way they lay out the panels and the way they show you his history and his history of violence and violence being done against him, basically, to get to this first idea of like the Joker. But then you start going from there through this series of incidents that they're hearing about in the news, one right after another, 3 in a row, they determine, okay, there's no way that the Joker could have been in all these places at the same time.
For sure. And that's where, another thing that's cool too is, like, before we even get to that scene, we see where Batman's at, Batgirl's at, and Red Hood is at, because when the issue starts off, we see Batman is injured and Alfred is repairing him. Then the news comes on. They're like, yo, Joker just killed some of the last remaining members of the Moxon family. Batgirl's at the gym. She's running on the treadmill. They're like, hey, Joker just killed this comedian at a bar. Then we see Jason Todd via his Red Hood helmet. He's listening into the news. We see that the Joker just committed some crimes at Ace Chemicals, but the police are not going to report, how many people were killed or any of that information. And this is all happening back to back. And I think it's really interesting that the 3 characters Johns chose for the story are the 3 characters closest tied to the Joker. Batman, obviously. But then you have Batgirl, who is paralyzed and seemingly raped by the Joker and the Killing Joke. And then you have Jason Todd, who is literally killed by the Joker in Death in the Family. So that is no accident that he chose the 3 characters that have the closest ties to the Joker for this story, which, and there's 3 of them: Batman, Batgirl, Jason Todd, and then 3 Jokers. So I think there's a reasoning for all of this. Clearly, the 3 is a common a common number in this. There's also 3 issues in the miniseries, and it looks like issue 3 is going to be heavily focused on Batgirl by the previews we've seen. But,
exactly right. Yeah.
But that's for a later time. Anyway, though, what's crazy is one of the guys that Joker poisoned at Ace Chemicals is alive. They find out, so they throw him in an ambulance and they're going to take him to the hospital. But we find, as Batgirl and Batman are escorting the ambulance to the hospital, that someone inside is like terrorizing the victim. And obviously, you would think it's the Joker. If I remember correctly, a panel even shows a silhouette of the paramedic from behind where they're loading him in, but you see like his arm and it's white, so it's kind of like, oh, it's the Joker, right? But it's not. We find out it's actually Jason Todd, the Red Hood, who's trying to get information out of him, which was really crazy. Batman obviously has to bust in. And my favorite part of this little sequence was at the end when obviously Batman, stops Jason. He's like, don't do that. They stop the ambulance. But Batgirl's yelling at Jason, like, what the hell are you doing? You could have killed him, blah, blah, blah. He's a victim, Jason. He's like, a victim? This guy came from a halfway house, a junkie, and he assaults his kid like all the time. So he's lucky I didn't throw him outside of the ambulance. And I'm like, yes, this is why I love Jason Todd, because no F's are ever given. He's like, he may be a victim, but he's not a good guy. He freaking beats his kid, so he's lucky I didn't kill him. You know what I mean?
He says something to the effect of like, he has a rap sheet as the length of my arm or something to that effect.
For sure. Yeah. I love that whole, anti-hero thing where it's like, no, just because, he's a victim, doesn't make him a good person. So I just love that whole dynamic. But ultimately, so we're not breaking down every single thing in the issue. Ultimately, this all leads to Batgirl and Batman and Jason Todd going to an aquarium where I have to mention this one was crazy, where we see a Jokerized shark, like a
Dude.
great white shark.
I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to. Yeah, that was like the best. I freaking loved that.
It was like awesomely
Bruce
terrifying.
It was like Bruce from Finding Nemo, but like a Jokerized version of it.
But it looks like scary. Like imagine, like, because in my head, I'm just thinking, I'm like, imagine seeing an actual great white shark that like had a terrorized, like was Jokerized, a crazy smile. Like that would be the scariest thing you've ever seen. But so that was awesome. But was really cool for, again, longtime Batman fans is they reintroduced Gaggy, who, again, this is a deep dive. This is where freaking Geoff Johns is going. Like a lot of Batman fans might not even know who this guy is. But Gaggy he was basically the Joker's sidekick, like way back in the day before I was even born.
Gesture, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, that is awesome. Now, again, we're saying spoilers. He gets eaten by the Jokerized shark via Jason Todd shooting the glass from the aquarium. But funny. He lasted like 3 or so pages. And this is where I think the book starts getting really, really good. Long story short, right after this, one of the 3 Jokers shows up, right? And he starts attacking all of them, but they were able to subdue him. At that point, Jim calls him, was like, yo, we got another Joker cornered. And Batman's like, yeah, I got one here. So Batman has Batgirl and Jason Todd tie them up and says, look, wait for the Arkham transport. I got to go, see this other Joker that Jim's got cornered. And this, I'm a big Red Hood fan. I'm a massive Red Hood fan.
Yeah.
So this next scene I thought was awesome. So obviously the Joker's not going to keep his mouth shut, right? This is one of the Jokers. He starts going off rattling to Jason, antagonizing him, being like, oh, so you're alive, basically saying all the times how, the night he killed him and what he was saying, like how he was pleading for him to stop. And he's like, do you remember what you said that night? Because I always remember it. It's like, I actually repeat it to myself all the time. You were saying, please don't stop. I'll do anything if you stop. I'll be your Robin. And that line right there, I was like, oh man. Yeah, that is pretty freaking crazy.
That was a heavy drop,
right? That was like you're trying to say, because that was a massive like reveal, right? It's like, oh man, he's freaking outing Jason Todd, saying he's like, please, if you stop, I'll be on your side. Is basically what he said, right? And he keeps continuing going further and further, saying, he's like, you ever wonder why like I didn't kill you all the way? I just brought you to the edge of death. It was to hurt him, not you, never you, always him. So like he doesn't care about Batgirl. He didn't shoot Batgirl because he doesn't like her or he hates her, so much, or he didn't kill Jason Todd because of this. Everything he does is to bring pain to Bruce, not Jason, not Batgirl. That's just collateral damage. He's like, yeah, I'm only doing this because it's gonna hurt him. And I'm like, holy crap. So then to go one step further, again, the Joker's saying, yeah, and not only that, when you came back to life, you took on my old persona, the Red Hood. And Jason's like, yeah, I just did that to prove that, like, I'm over it. Like, I'm owning it, right? And the Joker's like, oh, yeah? Well, guess what? Joke's on you because you came back as the Red Hood, killing people, making Batman's life miserable, becoming my Robin. And that was like the end line. I'm like, obviously it's said a lot better and within context when you read the issue. But the point is, like, it was almost as if the Joker set this all up where he's like, no, I'm gonna I know you're gonna come back. I know you're gonna do this, but in doing that, you're gonna make Batman's life miserable. In essence, working for me because my whole purpose in life is to make Batman miserable. And I'm like, holy crap, that's amazing. Like that, I thought that there's more after that, but I'm like, that is fantastic.
That's one of the most well-written aspects of this first issue.
For sure.
Is them breaking it down. And just to kind of go backwards a little bit and touch on what you hinted at there with the 3, everything in this story seems to revolve around 3s. And one of the things we have to mention is in between the crime scenes and the aquarium, we actually find the Joker.
Yes, for sure.
Driving this truck full of toxins that he stole from Acme, where they originally show up. Batman shows up, and that's where he meets Batgirl and everything like that. And they find one of the thugs, who he says this is a person who was taken from a halfway house or whatever in the ambulance. they deduce that, this tank that's now empty was full of Joker toxin of some kind, and it's gone now along with a tanker truck. So where did it go? And then that takes us to, we see the Joker driving down an old, a country road or whatever, into kind of like this backwoods to a cabin where he knocks on the door, and who opens but the Joker, the exact same Joker that we see in the Killing Joke, wearing that flower shirt and the hat and the whole thing.
Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah, the Hawaiian shirt. He's identical to the Joker from the Killing Joke. And the Joker that we see who knocked on the door is the Joker or at least it looks very similar to the Joker who beat the crap out of Red Hood,
Yes.
Or or Jason Todd Robin, right? Who beat him almost to death. So we're seeing that these Jokers, the three Jokers, are each directly tied to each of the three heroes, Batgirl, Red Hood, and Batman, in very specific ways.
Yes.
They impacted their character, and they had very specific, impactful storylines directly attached to each one of these characters. That's also incredibly important to note, because that speaks directly to what happens at the end of the book between the Joker that they find at the aquarium and Red Hood.
Yes.
Jason Todd. So he gets attacked. That's how that Joker knew, this is what you said to me, blah, 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 blah. Now, in that same meeting of the two Jokers, when he gets there, there's a third Joker that they refer to as the boss.
The boss Joker.
Right? And then they argue, it's like, well, he only thinks he's the boss. And then, so one of us has to be the boss, that sort of a thing. But he seems to be calling the shots, but we don't know which Joker that he actually is, but he looks just like the classic Joker that we're all used to seeing Batman battle, going back in time.
It's really weird though, too, right? Because you're taking like the most iconic versions of the Joker ever, right? Joker with a crowbar from Death in the Family, Killing Joke Joker, and then just kind of like your all around classic Joker look, quote unquote, the generic Joker, which is what you envision when you look at the Joker. So it's like, besides their clothing, it's almost like you can't really even tell, right? Because, I mean, with little hair changes here and there, but it's just, for me, it's just like, because when I think of Jokers, and when I think most people think of the Joker, these are like the interpretations or looks for the Joker I think of, which I think, not when I think, it's, that's got to be on purpose. You know what I mean? You're literally pulling from the most iconic Joker, stories and looks ever. So, to that point, yeah, really, really crazy. And I don't know about you, but I found it sometimes kind of a little weird trying to keep everything straight as far as like when reading it back and forth, because I'm like, okay, all right, okay, because there's three Jokers, so I feel like this is gonna going forward, it might get a little crazy to just keep everything straight in my head. Without question.
And I think that, I will say though, I do think that they did a really good job, especially because of the way they delineated it with the Joker, the Killing Joke Joker, where he's wearing the Hawaiian shirt, and then you have the other Joker who's wearing that kind of furly Colonel Sanders tie, and then you have the other one who's wearing that the bow tie with more of like a trench coat. There's a lot of similarities, obviously, but there's also a lot of differences that I think do a good job of telling you, okay, which one is which, and which one is going to be directly associated with the stories of the heroes involved.
For sure.
So I think that's a really fun aspect of it. And even more than that, I think one of the things that stood out between their interactions, the one scene that we got of the three Jokers interacting was when they said, what are we doing next? And the two ask the boss Joker, we'll call him that, what are we doing next? And his answer was, what we always do, we try to make a better Joker. And he refers to something called the Factory, which is really interesting because that directly speaks to maybe what the bigger picture is in the background to all of this.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, that right there is kind of, I feel like it's a mislead where they're like, they're kind of answering it right there. Like, where do these three Jokers come from? It's like, oh, because the one main Joker has just been making Jokers and he's making better Jokers. So, you know what I mean? But it's kind of like weird because the boss Joker is basically like the modernized Joker, right? Especially just by his outfit. Right. Where then the Killing Joke Joker is a Killing Joke Joker. And then let's call him the Death in the Family Joker is wearing like that, that more Silver Age, Joker look. So it kind of almost debunks itself. It's like, well, why would the modern Joker be like the boss Joker? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wouldn't he be the original Joker that created them all?
Right.
Or wouldn't he not? Wouldn't like the Golden Age Joker be the Joker that created them all? See, it's getting confusing even talking about this. But it's very interesting. It does tell you like where the 3 issues are going to go, though, especially as we go back to Jason Todd being taunted by, let's call him his Joker.
We'll say
the Jason Todd Joker.
The Jason Todd Joker.
That each Joker is gonna spotlight each of these 3 issues, where this one is very much focusing on Jason Todd's Joker. Issue 2 from previews we've seen is gonna probably spotlight on the Killing Joke Joker, and then issue 3, the finale, will be the modernized Joker or Batman's Joker, and that'll be like the big revelation of everything going on. So I think that's very smart, but also I'm like, but there's so many ways. We'll get to that in a bit, though. Let's just tell them how the issue finishes.
Yeah, it really is. It's really because he presents so many different things here, and it starts with the introduction of Gaggy. But after all that, and we get through all of the run in between the Joker and what he says to Robin, the Red Hood Robin, and everything, and he kind of goes through that whole, you made yourself into my Robin, you fulfilled your promise. Right. And he says to him, one of the things that that you were alluding to when Red Hood says to him, like, no, I was owning what you did to me. You made me into this.
Mm-hmm.
And Joker's answer, no, what kind of a psychopath takes on the name and the moniker of his killer? Like that's a crazy. Only a crazy person would do that, right?
Which is something coming from the Joker, right?
Yeah.
That's how you know it's crazy.
And him laughing, and that moment. This was one of my favorite parts of the issue. Again, just this whole sequence was.
Well, this is the climax of the issue. So
this is the climax of the issue, and this really was just so smart because they take you through this whole thing of the Joker basically showing Red Hood, like you fulfilled exactly what I intended for you, and you didn't even know.
That's the brilliance of the Joker, right? Like he never has a plan, but he always has a plan.
But it's also such a smart storyline from Johns there, in the way of, because we've talked about, we actually did a whole episode on the relationship between Batman and the Joker.
Yes,
here on the show, and where we break down a lot of these elements about Joker's obsession with Batman. And that is what Johns is playing off of here, right? Is that, years old, decades old obsession of the Joker with Batman, where everything he does, every action he takes, every waking moment is focused in on how he can affect Bruce Wayne Batman. That is his whole life. And in a weird way, Batman always has the Joker in the back of his mind as well. And it's kind of reciprocal in this weird way. And that's what I thought was interesting about the beginning of the book, where they're taking us through all of these elements of Bruce's past and his history from the death of his parents all the way till now, as if he's telling us without directly saying it, that this is all attached. That's, this is going to speak directly to at least one of these Jokers, and what's going on in this situation is going to speak directly to why Batman is obsessed with Joker and why Joker is obsessed with Batman. And that is something that really stood out to me as interesting and compelling. And then that goes back, takes us back to all the way forward to what this Joker is doing to Red Hood, to the point to where Red Hood finally just snaps and has had enough.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see Johns explore this, because as many of us know, Snyder also explored this in Death of the Family.
Right.
You know what I mean? In the New 52. So it's really cool to see like this relationship, this kind of relationship with the Joker and Batman, the symbiotic one, be acknowledged by two different like powerhouse writers. It's like almost cementing that, like, no, this is like their relationship. You know what I mean? Like this is the true Batman Joker relationship, because you have different writers, different things, but like, seeing two writers like that agree that like he's almost like in love with Batman in that way is really, really cool and interesting to see. Because again, like the Joker straight up says, like, I didn't do this to you or Barbara because to get you. Like he says, quote, like, not you, never you, always him, as in Batman. You know what I mean? And I
Wow.
thought just that alone, these last like, what is it, 8 or so pages are just so impactful with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with that whole thing going back to like, you became basically what you never wanted to, Joker solidifies it and literally says like, and look at you. You're like my little Red Hood, making Batman's life miserable. You're my Robin.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow.
Brilliant.
Wow. And then, of course, like, most of this issue is a 9-panel layout, very much like the Watchmen and the Killing Joke, which is all on purpose because, this is supposed to give you that iconic, classic feel, which, again, I think is brilliant by both Johns and Fabok. But obviously after that, long story short, that final line, the final thing the Joker says, "You are my Robin," pushes him over the edge. And it happens, Tim. It happens as everyone knows from Under the Red Hood, when we were introduced to Jason Todd becoming the Red Hood. He's always wanted his vengeance on the Joker, and he finally gets it and puts a bullet through the Joker's head. And it is violent. When you look at that panel, it is gory. You see the brain matter, the blood, and Joker's cards go flying everywhere as he falls to the ground. And I was like, he did it. Freaking did it. He got his revenge. It finally happened. Insane.
And the other thing too, but in that scene, one of the other things, because Barbara Gordon Batgirl is standing there with him trying to talk him down the whole time.
Yeah.
And at the end, she tries to hit him and it doesn't work. She throws her Batarang at the gun.
To deflect it. Yeah.
To deflect, to knock the gun out of the way, but it bounces off the top of the gun and he pulls the trigger and kills the Joker. But when at the very end there, she says, she's telling him, "What did you just do?" And he said, "I ended it." Right. And then he says, "Don't tell me you didn't want it." And she says, "Oh, really? And, I didn't want this." And his response is, "Really? When's the last time you missed, Barbara?"
So good.
And then she has to admit it, that she wasn't willing to stop him, really. And she just says, "Screw you, Jason," and she walks out on him because she knows that she could have stopped him and she didn't, because she wanted him to do it just as much.
Yeah, it was one of those things like, I want to stop you, but I don't. But it's just so, because both of them are in tears too, right? Like, because before, because it's also, it's not like that normal Red Hood we know where, he has no problem putting a bullet through a criminal's head. Like, literally, Jason is in tears up until he pulls that trigger. Like, because you see, again, it's a 9-panel layout. You see the Joker say, "You're my Robin." Then Jason's in tears holding the gun to him. And then you see a flashback of him getting beat with a crowbar. And then the next panel is him squeezing the trigger. It is just so well done.
And it's what's so cool about it is there's like this realization in both characters that the Joker is telling the truth, that he's right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this realization in Jason Todd that, oh my God, I've just done exactly what he hoped I would do.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most powerful elements of this line of story, which is it's just really, really smart. I really enjoyed it.
And I love how the last panel of the issue is Jason looking at the Joker's body saying, "Man, I hope that's the right one." Like, I hope I killed the real Joker, not the imposter. But it's so, this goes back to what we were saying earlier. It very much seems like this issue was all about Jason Todd's relationship with the Joker. Next one is probably going to be all about Barbara Gordon's relationship with the Joker. And the final issue will be all about Batman's relationship with the Joker. So man, I think we're in for a ride. And there's just so many theories. Like in the book, has Joker been stealing Ace Chemicals all these years just to create new, better Jokers? If so, how is he implanting all these memories in them? Is he giving them a history lesson of everything he's done in the past? Or it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, seeing what Snyder's been doing with the DC universe right now and what he's done with the Joker and Justice League. If somehow the Joker was able to keep every version of himself after a crisis reset, where now he has, those are all the Jokers. He's able just to keep each version of himself somehow.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I am very hopeful though, because, so with stories like this and big events, it is kind of, it's like, yes, the first 2 issues or the first several issues were good, but it didn't land. But I will say with Johns, Johns for me is usually like the one guy who could always stick the landing. I mean, heck, with Doomsday Clock, most of the Doomsday Clock story was just like, yeah, it was all right. And then the last issue, I'm like, oh my God, this is one of the best issues I've ever read.
Yeah, we weren't sure. We really weren't sure if he was going to be able to stick the landing because we were like, it was so much dialogue and it was so much setup. And we were like, where are you going with this, Johns? And then the end, you're like, wow.
So if he can do that again for this, I don't even know. That would be insane. But I'm very excited. I love that it's dealing with basically like my favorite Joker stories, essentially. Most people's favorite Joker stories. I mean, The Killing Joke is my favorite Joker story ever. So I can't tell you how. It's not even just my favorite Joker story. It's my favorite comic book story ever. I don't know.
Right.
That's just you asked me what's my favorite comic book story arc. It's The Killing Joke. So for the second issue of the series to deal with that, and him taunting Barbara in the same way he did to Jason,
that's gonna be wild.
Oh man, that's gonna be, because he even says it in this book. Like the Killing Joke version of the Joker in this book flat out says himself that to this day, what he did in The Killing Joke is his greatest accomplishment yet. Not killing Jason Todd, the shooting of Barbara Gordon and tormenting James Gordon, just to get the point that I can make anyone go bad. It just takes one bad day. So for the Joker himself to be like, he's, the one who's done all these crimes, to say, yeah, this is still my greatest achievement. Oh man, I'm excited for issue 2.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I got to tell you, the setup that he's got here of this 3-story arc, or this 3-issue arc rather, where we're going to end with, going back to, again, what we saw possibly being set up at the beginning of this first issue, where this is all leading to some kind of a broader explanation at what is at the heart of the psychology of the Joker and the Batman's relationship, and why these things have just continued at seemingly just without end over the years, where Joker is always comes back and manages to find his way back into the middle of Batman's world and vice versa. That is the part that has me the most excited. I also love, because I love the fact that he's readdressing, the events of The Killing Joke. I love the fact that he's readdressing the events of the death of Jason Todd and, his reemergence as the Red Hood and all of the different pieces that they added there. But it's that part, that element of it, and that possibility, that potential is what has me the most excited, especially, again, after seeing how he was able to wrap up Doomsday Clock. That's what has me most excited, to see him bring this bring it all home, as you said.
For sure. And I'm very curious to see how it ends and what that's going to mean for Batman continuity going forward. I also feel like this book was like made for me, because everyone listening probably knows, like, obviously Batman and Joker are like my favorite hero, favorite villain in comic books, but Jason Todd, I've made it very well known that Red Hood is probably my favorite, ally of Batman's. Him and Nightwing are pretty close, but I feel like more so than often, Red Hood just goes on top, because he's like he's the badass, right? He's the anti-hero. He's almost
right.
He's like good, but he does the things that you wish Batman would do, but he wouldn't. You know what I mean? But he doesn't.
What you're just really admitting to is you have a dark side.
Hey, everyone loves the Red Hood. He still fights for justice. He just gets the job done. But
what Arris is trying to say is, if he wouldn't really be Batman, he would be Red Hood.
Dude, that would be kind of awesome. We could rant on this all day long, though, because we just skimmed the surface of it. I mean, it's a huge story, and there's a lot to talk about. And, Geoff Johns is really digging into all, like, deep Batman lore. So, yeah, but we're going to be doing an episode on it pretty soon, which is going to be fun for everyone, I hope, because this has been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's already shot, and you guys can expect that here in the coming week or so.
Yes. But let's move on to Thor. As we said earlier, Thor, again, this is my favorite my favorite book currently coming out each month. It is so much fun, and just, it's just action-packed. It's just an action-packed, like thrill ride, I feel. Like, because Donny Cates' dialogue, the things, he makes Thor say, and just the things he's revealing with Galactus and his lineage, I'm just like, yes, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And before we dive in here, I just got to say, my favorite line from the entirety of his run thus far is when they call Thor a god made king.
Yeah.
I was like, that is so cool. Yes. It's just those little things that it just drives the point home so much. It's like, what, 5 words? So good.
Yeah. Yeah. This one is, this entire run up until now, we actually covered every issue of this book on the main channel for Variant, with the most recent covering issues 5 and 6 that just came out. But this whole run is just brilliantly written by Cates all the way through and all the way down the line. And it has some of the most, you said it, just jaw-dropping moments that you've seen in a Marvel title in quite a while.
Yeah.
And it kind of builds up with this idea of the emergence of the Black Winter. And the Black Winter finally arrives, and, there's this incredible interaction between Thor and the Black Winter, where the Black Winter reveals, like, I'm not here for you. You know what I mean? He's there for Galactus. He's coming after Galactus. He's been looking for Galactus ever since their last encounter, and he begins to explain why the Black Winter spared Galactus in the first place, and in reality gave Galactus his powers, right?
Which is really, Donny Cates is basically rewriting freaking Galactus' origin in a sense. You know what I mean? He is completely he is filling it out, and we find out that he was actually the first Herald.
That's exactly
he's
right.
The Herald of the Black Winter.
Yep.
Which that was a mouth drop moment all on its own.
Big time. And not only that, but also it raised the question of well, what does that mean? Like, his herald for what?
Destruction,
right?
Tim. Destruction.
Just mass destruction, yeah. But there's he's hunting for him, and why are you hunting for him? Why did you want to destroy him? Why did you want to take him? What was his purpose for you? All of those things are still unanswered. So there's a lot left to be answered here. But one of the things that I just freaking loved, and it speaks kind of in the same vein of what your favorite line was, where Thor is referred to as a god-made king, where when the Black Winter first begins to interact with Thor, and Thor is basically saying, like, hey, like, whatever you're here for, I'm not having any of it. Mm-hmm. But the Black Winter, as powerful as it is, it refers to Thor in all kinds of names, right? Thor, God of Thunder, King of Asgard, Thor the All Butcher. And he refers to him as the End God.
Yep.
Right? Just all these really dope titles. And Thor, I think, even acknowledges, he's like, I've never worn these titles before, but, I'll take them. They sound pretty cool. But he goes on to display, before the end, he robs Galactus, who has just gotten done feeding in issue 5. He had finished feeding off of these 5 really essential planets, who I believe it's Silver Surfer in issue 1 or 2, who tells us, like, there's these 5 planets that their makeup would give him immeasurable power, and so I've hid them from him.
Yeah, and they reveal them to him so he could defeat the Black Winter.
Exactly. So and he's like, if he eats this, that'll give him a chance to actually defeat the Black Winter. So Thor goes goes with him to help him do this. And Thor's whole thing is like, you're not just going to go and destroy these worlds and wipe out these people. I'm going to go ahead of you to these planets. We're going to take the people off the planet. We're going to send them to Asgard, and then you can consume the planet. So he's been going around and doing that and evacuating everybody from these planets to Asgard, except they get to the last one right as the Black Winter is arriving, and there's not enough time, and Galactus consumes the whole planet. Thor tries to stop him, but he consumes the whole planet and wipes out everybody on it, and Thor is just pissed. He's like, you're going to pay for that. When all this is said and done, you're going to account for what you just did, right? So he goes through and he starts, right at that moment is when the Black Winter arrives, and he starts interacting with the Black Winter, and the Black Winter's hit him with all these dope new titles that he's never had before. And Thor is just like, yeah, I'm not going to let you do anything. And he goes after Galactus. That's when we find out that Galactus is actually the herald of the Black Winter. And, Galactus is like, don't listen to him. He's lying. And,
please don't listen to him. I need you.
Yeah. And the Black Winter is like, yeah, I don't lie, man. And Thor just winds up stripping Galactus of all of his cosmic power. Literally takes it from him.
Yes.
And absorbs it into himself. As if Thor, this version of Thor, which I think everyone can agree at this point, this is the most powerful version of Thor we've ever seen.
I don't think I've said it on the show yet, but I think this version of Thor is the most powerful hero in all of the Marvel universe.
I would agree with that.
Like,
I
I'm
don't
talking
think
about he's
we've ever
soloing
seen, yeah.
Sentry, he's soloing like Hyperion, like everybody. The Hulk,
Yeah.
everybody's gonna die.
Just wiping everybody out.
Yeah.
But easily the most shocking moment of the series so far, and one of the most shocking moments in recent Marvel comics, I would say, in quite a while. Thor gathers all this power, and he stays true to his word, and he makes Galactus. But the Black Winter is wanting Galactus for himself, and Thor's like, nope, I got business with this dude. And he literally destroys Galactus. He takes all of his power from him and turns Galactus into like a cosmic bomb and literally explodes him into powder.
Oh no, yeah, he solos him. He literally says, "I sentence you to death," and throws the hammer into him, killing him.
Yeah. Just wipes him out. It's one of the most crazy things. And before that, he hits him with this cosmic powered lightning that's just insane. And you see just this skeleton of Galactus. He's not completely dead yet, but he's just like burnt to shreds, and he's like this skeleton.
He looks
and
like a
that's when
zombie.
he said, yeah, he looks like a zombie. And that's when he's like, because the Black Winter's like, hey man, that's when he sees him. He's like, okay, now that you've had your business with him, now I want the rest of him. And Thor's like, nah, I'm not done. He's like, why? He's like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm turning him into a bomb so I can blow you up.
It's like he has no use to. Yeah, it was insane. But before we even get to that, one of my favorite beats is when Thor was fighting the Black Winter, right? And we see him as a Black Winter, just smoke originally. But he eventually ultimately takes the form of Thor himself.
Right.
Because Thor is screaming to him. He's like, stop hiding from me. You know what I mean? He's like, show me yourself. Show me my end then. If you know how I die, show me. Odin's son is scared of no one. So, Black Winter obliges, or so we think. He's all like, yeah, I'll show you, but not yours yet. As we see him turn into Thor. So we're like, what? And what he's doing in this moment is saying, I'm going to show you your death, but not yours yet. I'm going to show you Galen's, a.k.a. Galactus's. So while turning into Thor, all he's saying is, I'm telling you right now that Thor is going to kill Galactus.
Yeah.
So he said this a whole issue before it even happened. Like, this was, you know what I mean? Like, this was foreshadowed, like, before he even killed him, which I thought was great. I'm like, oh, man, so Thor does end up killing Galactus?
Yeah.
And then the next issue, he kills Galactus. It was just such a clever way to unveil. It's like, very well, I'll show you, but not yours yet. I'm going to show you Galen's.
Yes.
I was like, oh, snap.
When the Black Winter first shows up in the appearance of Thor, I think Thor turns to him and says, so this is what you saw then? And Galactus is like, yeah, that's what it is.
Dude.
It
It also proved the point that, like, Black Widow doesn't lie. Like, he knows how everything's gonna end.
Yeah.
Like, he knows everyone's death. So, if all that was enough, because there's a lot of other beats in there, pieces of dialogue that's super, super cool. But obviously, we're not gonna get to every single thing. But as if that beat was enough that you just said, where freaking Thor turns not only does he kill Galactus, he turns him into a bomb so he could use that bomb to kill the Black Winter. Not only that, after he blows up Galactus and the Black Winter, there's one ash left of the Black Winter, one final ash that falls into Thor's hand. And with Black Winter's last gasping breath, so to speak, he's like, do you want to see your end? He's like, now or never. I'm going to die I'm dying, okay? He's like, sure, show me. And this is what blew my mind. Everything else was awesome and literally made me go, what? But this next 2-page spread, I was like, what?
Crazy.
So he's like, do you want to see how you die, how your end? And he's like, yes. Then we turn the page. It's freaking Thanos holding Mjolnir that has the Infinity Gems imbued on them with an army of Marvel zombies behind him. And then, if that wasn't enough, on his left arm, he has what I'm assuming to be his son's gauntlet on his left hand, which, as said in the comics, that gauntlet alone brings death. Like, it's essentially like the touch of death. So he's got Mjolnir with Infinity Gems. He's got a gauntlet of death and an army of Marvel zombies. What is happening?
Clearly being controlled by the Infinity Gem Mjolnir.
What?
Which is one of the craziest. I was like, how? Okay. We've said 1,000 times on here that Donny Cates just sits around. He's like us as kids. When we go, you know what'd be cool?
Yeah. Dude, and
if the Mjolnir had the Infinity Gems in it.
And then we had him control the Marvel zombies because, they're just awesome. But also, let's give him like a gauntlet of death. That would be cool, right?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Freaking
and the
nuts.
the dialogue is so good. It's just worth like at the end there where it says after he uses Galactus as a bomb to basically wipe out the Black Winter. The writing is just so good. It says, I've actually got the quote here. It says, "And then in the falling ash of winter, amid the graveyard of a world destroyer, there was Thor and the end of everything." It's just so good, man.
You know what it is?
You know what I'm saying?
He's like, I think he's really figured out how to write Thor, where it's almost like, it's like Lord of the Rings or even Game of Thrones. Like, he's very much in that vein. And I'm like, yes, that's Thor. Yes, do that. Keep doing that. You know what I mean? Like, the narration is brilliant. It really is. It's so good.
It is, man. And honestly, after that last page, because at the same time, you see that page with Thanos and the Infinity, hammer,
the Infinity Hammer,
and the Infinity Hammer, and the freaking zombie Marvel universe behind him,
which has Sentry in it, by the way. Like, just looking at the panel, you have like the Thing, Wolverine, Sentry, the Hulk, Venom, all
Black Bolt,
dude, essentially the entire Marvel universe just zombified.
Yes, and all the most powerful, beings in the Marvel. You got Juggernaut in there. It's crazy town. And then you flip the page, and it's Thor answering the final question about what he saw, because this is in issue 6. It's Silver Surfer. Norrin is actually asking him, "What did you see in the end at the battle with the Black Winter and Galactus?" And this is where he gives the final answer. He just looks down and says, "Darkness and nothing more." And that's the end of the issue. With him just on, like, drunk, Thor sitting drunk on his throne with the hammer next to him, with him just, like, depressed.
I'm so curious to see where this is going to go. Because, like, knowing Cates, like, I feel like his Thor title and his Venom title are going to tie in very, very soon. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's all got to lead to one massive Marvel event. Because, like, having Thanos, Marvel Zombies, like, there's no way that's just going to be self-contained in the Thor book. Like, that's got to be a crossover event. So, but at the same time, we already know come December, we're getting one of Marvel's next big events is going to feature Null for Venom, the symbiote guy.
Right. Without
I'm
question.
like, maybe at the end of that, he's just foreshadowing it super early, like, Johns did with the Three Jokers. Like, do we have like do we know what like 2022 is going to look like now because of this? Because that's how far out this is. Like, because that's, having a story where Thanos is controlling freaking the Marvel zombies and has, let's call it the Infinity Hammer, as you said, like, that's huge. That is big.
Crazy.
Man, Donny Cates, man. Donny Cates. Have him write stuff for Marvel forever. Just keep going. He's easily writing the best books Marvel has right now.
Oh yeah,
like,
without a doubt.
I don't even think that's like a personal statement. I feel like the majority of people would agree with that.
Yeah, he is. I think he's just killing it right now with everything that he's doing. It's like because you also have the events of Empire going on right now. And
it's kind of got lost in the shuffle, huh? I haven't heard anything about it.
Very much has gotten lost in the shuffle. And well, there's also what was the last one that dropped? Do you know?
4 or 5.
That shows you how busy we've been.
Yeah, I read the first 3 issues, and then I got distracted. Say that.
Well, with that, you've got the events of Empire going on, and then you've got this other big event that we know is looming in the background. And it really does make you wonder, like, okay, where is all of this going to head? How, or where is all this going to go? How is all of this going to come to a head with these storylines? Because you've got to, at some point, you've got to keep things in continuity. It's somewhere along the lines, you've got to bring all of these events together in some way. Unless you're just kind of, with what Donny Cates is doing, you're somehow blowing things up, and you're going to do something brand new, out of the events of what Donny Cates is doing. So Empire is kind of its own event off to its side, its own storyline. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, I believe we're 5 issues in to Empire. So then that's a 6-issue story arc. So there's just so many different things that are happening. But Donny Cates' storylines are what seem to be standing out the most. And that's not even to mention the fact that it's so much so that what Donny Cates is doing as far as his stories and then what he's doing with these characters and then the Marvel Universe as a whole is they just did the partnership with Fortnite, with their new Nexus War that's actually based and rooted in Marvel continuity, and it's based on the Thor run.
That was so crazy to me because, like, when I originally saw that, I'm just like, oh, they're using, the Donny Cates Thor costume just because that's the most current version of Thor. Nope, they're doing it on purpose because it's actually a continuity with the comics. Apparently, it takes place within issue 4 at some point, which is pretty freaking nuts. So everyone who's enjoying this Thor run is definitely going to want to play Fortnite Season 4 because it continues the story. It expands upon it, which, brilliant. I'm curious to see. And, Donny Cates hasn't led me astray thus far, so I feel like it's going to be pretty solid.
And there's even a 10-page spin-off book that's coming out in Fantastic Four, I believe issue 24, is it?
Yes.
I think it's issue 24.
I'm pretty positive 24 as well, yeah.
So they're expanding on that even further, but it just really shows you how much more of how much more intention, I guess, Marvel has for what Donny Cates is doing. And that's really exciting because without doubt, I'm enjoying what he's doing more than any other book Marvel's got.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think I've said it before, but he's definitely Marvel's Scott Snyder. If Scott Snyder is the hot writer, ruling roost at DC, Donny Cates is definitely that, or becoming that for Marvel, for sure.
That's definitely a fair comparison,
Yep. But the last issue last series to talk about today is Maestro issue 1.
Yes.
Now, I don't know. I know you're a big Hulk fan. Hulk literally is your favorite superhero.
Right.
So Maestro Hulk, everyone's loved this character. He's like the freaking most badass Hulk ever. Like having a trophy room of like Thor's hammer, Captain America's shield, ending everyone.
Yep.
I will say out the gate though, giving just my summary of issue 1, I thought it was all right. I thought it was good. Like I wasn't blown away by it like Three Jokers issue 1 or Donny Cates Thor run. It wasn't bad by any means, but it didn't blow me away in the way I would have wanted it to, just like the Thor title did or Three Jokers issue 1 did. You know what I mean? It didn't have that.
Yeah.
It was missing that spark, that special something that would have pushed it over the edge. Like I don't think you could say it's a bad issue, but it didn't have that spark, especially for a character like this, which is so cool and like, potentially like the strongest Hulk outside of like Worldbreaker Hulk.
Right.
But again, we're only 1 issue in, so
yes.
I feel like it's still too early to tell because again, the first issue wasn't bad. It was, it's just
no, not at all.
Wasn't what I was expecting, I guess is fair to say. I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I kind of am viewing it a little bit like Doomsday Clock in a little bit of a way.
Yes, it could very much be something to that effect, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of viewing it in that way. It's where like this book was very much about setup. So I'm very much giving it a break, and we always give it several issues before we really pass judgment on any book.
Yes, I have a 3-issue rule.
Yeah, you always want to give it at least 3 or 4 issues. Before you can really pass any kind of judgment on whether or not you like a book, because you have to give the artist, the creator, a chance to show you where they're taking the story.
For sure.
And that's very, very difficult to do in just 1 issue, unless you get in like some super-sized issue or whatever, and then you can get a little bit more because that's it's basically 2 issues in 1. But anyway, with this story, I did like how it opened up, how it was, he was kind of in this Matrix world of sorts. And, it kind of took us through this thing where, we initially see he's got 2 kids with Betty, and, we all know that they don't have any children, but there's like this perfect world that he's in, and there's clearly something very off. And he quickly realizes that as Betty starts to repeat some things, and then when he starts to ask questions about like, hey, because one of their kids goes up to her and says, oh, I don't have to listen to you. And she says, why not? And he says, because you're dead. And then he's like, well, what's that supposed to mean? Yeah. Like, what's he talking about, Betty? Why is he saying you're dead? You're not dead, right? And the kid's like, dead, deadity dead. It's like ridiculous. But when he starts to question her, she starts to like say like bad command or file name or whatever. And he comes to realize that he's in like an illusion of some kind. And long story short, he finally breaks free of it after going through this exchange with a fake Avengers and this whole thing. And it comes to find out that we next see him where he kind of like breaks himself free of it mentally. And he wakes up in this lab where he's hooked to all these devices, almost look like something straight out of
Weapon X.
Weapon X. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was just really interesting because he was clearly in the future. He's got like a beard and long hair. And after an exchange with some agents from AIM,
I love Hulk with a beard. I do why.
Too. I think he looks dope. But yeah, he has like this interaction with some agents from AIM. He breaks through the ground. They shoot him, and these really powerful future tech guns. And he's clearly some years have passed, and it's this futuristic area. He's not sure where he is or what's going on. He breaks through the floor and he finds that there's other people hooked up to machines as well. One's you have Vapor, who's in like a tube, and Abomination, who's also hooked up through the same wires that he was, and is in some kind of a state of suspended animation. But long story short, he winds up, getting knocked to the ground, and he looks up and it's MODOK. And MODOK goes on to explain to him
an old-looking MODOK, though. Like,
yeah,
he looks,
really, yes.
Yeah, he looks like he's been through some stuff, and he's definitely aged.
Yeah, and I think Hulk even says like he looks like he's aged 100 years.
Yeah.
And but he goes on to explain to him like, look, there was a huge nuclear Holocaust, basically, which we all knew. We knew that was a big part of, the Maestro Hulk's past and things like that. We just didn't know anything about like, okay, well, what kind of a war, what led to it, and all that kind of thing. And that's where we get in this book, MODOK kind of lays all that out and says that there was a terrorist group that basically hacked the computer systems of the United States and Russia, and had each country thinking that the other one had launched nuclear weapons at the other. And that leads to a nuclear exchange. By the time the countries figured it out, like 60% of the world had been wiped out. And then later down the line, a secondary...
It's almost like a reverse Watchmen, right? Where instead of having the worlds unite, you're tricking them to have them kill each other.
Yeah, very much so. And then it goes on to explain that after that, another terrorist group that had come to be known as the Black Scythe had come together and decided that, human beings' time on Earth had basically come to an end, and their job was to wipe out whoever was left after the nuclear holocaust had already finished off about 60% of the planet. And they released basically toxic gases and destroyed the rest of humanity. So there was almost no one left, but when the nuclear blast hit, MODOK had an underground bunker, takes the Hulk and some other people that benefit from radioactive energy,
which I thought was really smart. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah,
to take like anyone who could like absorb that energy and use it, back
and thrive.
At those people.
Yeah,
and thrive. I was like, all right. I feel like that's coming back around too, because we saw glimpses of Abomination and characters of that sort. So I feel like there's no way we're not going to see them coming out of like their sleep or whatever you want to call it, their cryo freeze.
Yeah, you would think so. So I have to imagine they're going to play a role. Otherwise, they wouldn't have shown them to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really interesting from there, it kind of goes through this process where Hulk, just goes back and forth with MODOK. MODOK tries to convince him to stay and help them rebuild the world. Hulk doesn't believe him at first and breaks through to the surface to find that MODOK was telling him the truth. And he just comes to the surface of what used to be Los Angeles, and it's just an absolute ruin. And
I was getting
the remains of a nuclear holocaust.
Were you getting like massive like T2 vibes from this book?
Yes,
like
there was a lot of that.
a lot of the imagery, right? Especially like when the nukes went off, the way it's like disintegrating all the people, or even like the dystopian like city. I was like,
Yeah.
clearly Peter David likes some James Cameron.
I do think is interesting. I've said this to you recently. This story obviously very focused on a dystopian future where humanity is just determined to destroy itself, and that's actually one of the big themes here, where that leads Bruce Banner Hulk to kind of turn and start to go in a dark path, where he says, because at first when he's questioning MODOK whether he's telling the truth, he's like, surely the other heroes would have stopped this from happening. And he kind of, as he's walking into where he's about to break into the open, just before that, he's saying to himself, but wait a second, how do you stop? He basically is like, we weren't able to stop Chernobyl. We weren't able to stop the fall of the Twin Towers, right? He's like, what do you do with a species basically that's just determined to destroy itself? And this is kind of a theme that we've just seen played out on the pages of comic books, but as well as movies, television, for the last couple of decades pretty heavily. And I think increasingly so as we got into the 90s and the 2000s. And, I think that's one of the reasons that I kind of I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by the book, but as I was reading it, I was just like, man, this is not what I want to read right now.
It was just it was hitting too close to home for you.
Just with everything going on, dude. It was just like, I really feel like we're entering into a time very similar to after World War II, where there was this real burst of like hopeful, optimistic entertainment that was really focused on like lighthearted things. And it didn't, it wasn't until we got into like the 60s and 70s and there was, heavier things starting to churn up in the country again, that you started seeing more turn in entertainment to where it got a little darker.
I feel like you're almost alluding that it's like, maybe you released this book at the wrong time. Maybe you should have waited a little longer.
Yeah. It is what it is. I understand.
Because with his origin, because with him, you have to do it this way, right? Like that's the only way his origin makes sense. You can't do a happy take on it. So it's more so like the timing.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's an accident either. I think that is obviously they're releasing this book on purpose, like right now. Because we've had Maestro Hulk has been around for how long? So, I don't think it's a coincidence that after all these years, they decide to do the origin of Maestro Hulk right now. So I'm very curious to see, how all of this goes. I'm kind of like you. I was underwhelmed. But I think, again, for me, the part that made me go like, that had me go like, do I really want to read this book? Was that it's just very much about like, man, humanity is just determined to destroy itself. We're headed towards the inevitable. Yeah. It's just very dark and heavy. And in this time, I'm just like, man, we need to start looking for things that are going to give us something to hope for and cling on to that is beyond like, this is all leading to the inevitable doom and destruction of humanity.
I could see that. I think for me, like more so, I kind of just wanted to get more into like what led to like, I just kind of wanted to get more into like what led to the Hulk fighting off the Avengers and getting all their trophies. You know what I mean? Like destroying everyone, I'm very curious. I think now, to be fair, again, it's a slow burn. I think issue 2 and 3, we're eventually going to get there and see all that stuff to where he comes to like his final form, so to speak. But I don't know. It's one of those issues where it's hard to pinpoint it for me why I wasn't like super, blown away by it. Again, I enjoyed the issue, but it wasn't like, it didn't have that wow factor for me. And I don't think it was necessarily, like that, the whole humanity's going to destroy itself bit like it was for you. I don't think that really is what did that for me for this. I can't pinpoint it. I don't know. It's one of those issues I just kind of or one of those series rather. I just have to keep reading and see where it goes. But it's definitely,
for sure,
it's definitely interesting. And I think, because I feel like it's also not fair. I say it all the time. It's not fair to really judge something by one issue because like you have to set it up being a writer and stuff like that to kind of run with it. Because some of my favorite series like Doomsday Clock, like I was very much felt the same way with Doomsday Clock that I did with the first issue of Maestro. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. This was freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to give any final decisions or anything just yet. But again, I thought it was good.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously Peter David is a great writer.
Oh, for sure.
So this is, and really all this issue did was it just answered some really old questions about how did Maestro Hulk end up in the position that he was in the first place? Where did the war begin that led to all of this beginning in this particular universe? So, or on this particular Earth, I guess you could say. So that, that really, it just kind of answered some of those questions. So there was nothing particularly like mind blowing. It was just like, oh, okay, well that answers that. And then it sets up for us to actually see the process of him getting from this initial point where he learns of the death of his wife. He learns of the death of his friends. But in previous, and other storylines as well in the Marvel Universe in the past, it has alluded to the fact that at this point, by the time the Hulk wakes up, many of the Marvel heroes have already been killed.
Yes.
They died in the wars that occurred. So many of them, he doesn't have a hand in killing or destroying. He does collect, artifacts from them and puts them in his trophy room. But we don't know which ones actually may have survived, if any.
That's the thing I was actually going to bring up. Like, I'm very curious to see too, because like you said, this issue says a lot of them died. So I'm wondering, like, did he come into conflict with a bunch of them? You know what I mean? Like, how did he get their weapons and stuff? Did he just find Cap's shield and stuff like that, or Magneto's helmet? I'm very curious to see like how that goes, because we do know too, like, eventually Maestro is like this ruthless dictator. So he's gonna have blood on his hands. I just want to know whose blood.
Yeah, because he basically, and at the end of the issue, what we see him leave MODOK, and they had walked up to what was left of the Hollywood sign. Somehow, miraculously, the Hollywood sign survived the nuclear apocalypse. But he goes up and he rearranges it he takes off and he rearranges it and it says the Hulk, which is obviously insinuating the beginning of Hulk's reign on what's left of the Earth. So
that's one of the beats though that I was like a little, okay, like it's just like,
yeah,
why though? All right, I mean, I get the symbolism and why, but I'm like, yeah, all right,
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's going to be interesting to see how it all goes from here, what he builds off of, because again, this issue is set up and it really just was served to answer some of the basic questions about the origin of Maestro. And for those of you wondering, we're actually covering the issue as well on the main channel this coming Friday, so you guys can take a look at that as well. There'll be a full episode covering the first issue of Maestro as well.
Yeah, I think by the end of this miniseries, I think we're gonna have a pretty solid origin for Maestro Hulk. I think it's going to be something fun. And once we get into the middle is when we'll start getting like the fun, cool action beats. Because another thing for me, it's like coming off all these action-packed issues, it's giving you like so much, and then going to a brand new issue which has to set up story before you can get there. I think that probably played a hand in it for me. So I feel like it's also kind of not fair in that sense when I'm reading stuff like Venom, which is way far in the middle of things. Thor, same thing. Three Jokers, which was double size, so got to that huge climax because it was basically 2 issues in one. So I feel like it also kind of isn't fair because all the current stuff I'm reading is just so like jam packed and getting to all the juicy stuff real quick.
Yeah, it definitely separates itself from that, and that's probably one of the reasons why it was harder for you, because we're in the middle of Three Jokers and Thor and all these other titles that are, death metal and all these other things.
And then we get a number 1 that's setting up everything.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a much slower pace, and it was a much less eventful, I guess you could say, issue. But again, just going back, one of the most interesting aspects of this book, there's some pieces to this story, and we get into them in the episode, that I mentioned previously, where there's some interactions there with some Avengers, particularly Black Widow, that give some hints that maybe they might be looking to introduce, especially because of the timing of the reemergence of Maestro. I'm wondering if they might be looking to introduce him somehow into the MCU at some point, which would be really interesting, because at the beginning of Maestro number 1, who do we see? We see Smart Hulk. We see Professor Hulk. Which is who we get left off with in the MCU. Bruce Banner is Professor Hulk. He's Smart Hulk at the time. So I'm very curious to see if there's going to be some kind of a correlation, especially because they're opening up the multiverse in the MCU as well, and they're cracking, they've cracked that egg over there. So that was one of the big standouts for me, is like, oh, is this leading somewhere? Because we know these comic book publishers, both DC and Marvel, are now pretty much setting up comics now to directly feed like an IV life source, the movie and TV universes. So that sparked my interest.
Yeah, I'm very, very curious. As Marvel, the Marvel Studios side of things, and kind of just Marvel in general, has been really quiet. I feel like DC has just been like all anyone's talking about, because they're just pumping stuff out left and right, whether it's comics, like for good or bad too. Like whether you're getting like, bad news, like all the layoffs they were doing, or good news, like DC fandom, DC has just been dominating the news for better or worse lately. Yep. And in comic books, where Marvel's just kind of been coasting, right? So I'm very curious to see, because we don't know they're doing stuff, and they're releasing stuff like this and doing little Easter eggs. We're like, could it be? But we haven't heard anything from them in so long. Yeah. I'm curious to see like are they rearranging stuff, or are they kind of just looking what to do because of COVID and all that stuff. I'm very curious to see if they're just gonna stay. They're on purpose. Seems like they're just being quiet for the year to get all their ducks back in a row, and then 2021 be like, all right. Okay, new plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and well, I mean, I guess I have to imagine that at least a part of that is Disney licking their wounds from all of the madness that's been going on this year. They've just taken an absolute financial beating.
You got to imagine too, because of the tragedy of Chadwick Boseman too. That was a bit. That's a big piece of their puzzle. Black Panther was going to be huge for them going forward. Yeah. So
well, that's just added to the pot, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that just happened, and they're 8 months into just getting bombarded, and the sad tragic.
So they're going to have
Chadwick Boseman, their Black Panther, which that's a separate topic for a separate day. Is like, how do you even begin to replace him?
For sure, they're going to rework it, recast what it's going to. That is a wrench. Just thrown into all the other suck that's been 2020.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because they had already openly talked about Black Panther 2 and it be playing a crucial role in the next phase, and even leading up to the following phase
for sure
of the MCU. So it's going to be real interesting to see what they have in store going forward. I have to imagine that they knew on some level what was going on with Chadwick. So
I'm very curious.
I'm sure it's that also, while they're trying to plan for it, it's probably on the back burner, just because their foremost thought is the what was happening with him. I mean,
for sure,
there's a lot of personal relationships there. So
yep. Well, we'll see where things going forward as far as the MCU goes, especially with little hints like this and in the comic books, because that would be very, very interesting for them to kind of get people, because they've been doing this like this, that's what comic book publishers do. Like you were saying earlier, like they kind of get you used to it in comic books for a few years, and then they bring it over into their movies, just like Captain Marvel. Like they were pushing and pushing and pushing Captain Marvel, whether people liked it or not, just because they knew they were going to introduce her into the movies, and stuff like that is only going to continue with both DC and Marvel, because that's definitely going to be a focus for both of them going forward.
Yeah, really curious to see where it all goes, man. There's a lot going on in comics right now, which is a lot of fun, especially for us. I mean, this is what we do. So it's been fun to see after, kind of the first few months of the year. Well, I should say March to, May kind of sucked, and then it was slow ramping up. But we're at a point now where we got some really great stuff going on in comics, and I think a lot to look forward to comics wise going through the remainder of the year.
For sure. I think remainder of the year, and even 2021, because I know, you hear a lot of stuff with the comic book industry, both for Marvel and DC. But I mean, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next year or two, I think we got a lot of cool stuff before we start seeing the real impact of all the changes that both Marvel and DC do for their publishing side.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep. But we have ranted for a long time, because we got lots of cool stuff to talk about today. I think it's funny.
Yeah, a lot of good comic stuff for a change also. This was all comic book themed, which we don't always get to do, mind you. Usually when we go this long, it's a lot of movie, TV news, but today we got to really rant about some great comics.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I've been like very, very jacked lately, because there's been lots of good comics coming out that I've been super excited about. Obviously, Three Jokers, Thor, Venom, all the deceased stuff. there's been lots of good comics coming out. So that's why it's kind of like, to me, it's a little annoying. People are like, comics are dead, comics are dying, blah, blah, everything's, everything sucks in publishing. We're never going to get print books again. I'm like, but there's so many good titles right now, like that's happening right now. You got Death Metal, you got Three Jokers, you got the Venom stuff, you got the Thor stuff. Like, it's like, what are you talking about? There's so many good books coming out. Because you hear people say like, there's nothing anyone cares about. I'm like, so clearly you don't read comics or look at anything that's coming out new, because there's lots of good titles coming out every month. So
Arris is like, correction.
Yeah, for sure, man. I could name a bunch. But anyway, again, I'm sure we'll talk about that in future episodes some more, as we're always going back to like the state of the comic book industry, because it's ever evolving recently, it seems.
Yep, that's right.
But with that said, guys, we will see you next time when we talk about all things comics.